In today's video, we're taking a look at a very interesting article from General Manager Jim Rutherford of the Pittsburgh Penguins on his potential plans for the NHL Trade Deadline. We're also taking a look at teams like the Columbus Blue Jackets, New Jersey Devils, and Ottawa Senators. We'll jump into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned today, we're looking at some trade rumors around some NHL teams ahead of the NHL Trade Deadline. And I'm going to kick things off, first of all, with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, we had an article on The Athletic, which I'll show you a few snippets here throughout the discussion. An interview with Jim Rutherford from writer Josh Yeo, where he posed some questions about his potential plans ahead of the deadline. Now, he went on to say that he definitely was in the market for a top six forward due to the fact that they're not going to have Jake Guentzel for the remainder of the regular season. He said obviously he would prefer to have Guentzel there. The fact is he's not healthy. He won't be able to return in time. So therefore, they would like to bolster that top six ahead of the playoffs, and they're really in win now mode. Like I said before, and I've said this numerous times, when you have guys like Crosby and Malkin still relatively in their prime years here, still producing at a high level, they will continue to go for it and try to be in that win now mode every year until that phase starts to phase out and those guys start to come down in their play here over the years, which is really difficult to say when that's going to happen. Obviously, they're getting older, but their play still continues to be really, really strong. So clearly some top six forwards out there that would certainly be an upgrade for them. Potential targets would be Tyler Toffoli of the Los Angeles Kings. He's certainly a guy to keep your eye on. Of course, Kyle Palmieri in New Jersey is another interesting name to keep your eye on. He comes with a little bit of term. Rutherford did indicate in his article that he's open to both scenarios, either a rental player or somebody with term. And of course, it's been mentioned on numerous occasions by NHL insiders that Jason Zucker of the Minnesota Wild is a player they've had a lot of interest in for a long period of time, and that interest is still there, and that there very well could be a deal on the table. I know I've heard Elliot Friedman state in some radio outlets before that there's basically a deal there to be had should the Wild decide to go ahead and move Zucker along. I'm not sure what the offered price would be going to the other way to Minnesota, but there's a lot of interest there for sure. Now, he was asked as well if he'd be willing to entertain the notion of trading his first round pick in the upcoming 2020 NHL draft. He kind of hummed and hawed and hesitated a little bit. Wasn't really, completely opposed to it, but it wasn't really eager for it either. He said that basically he didn't really want to do it, that generally you don't want to move that first round selection, but he said it could be a possibility. I guess it kind of depends on the deal. So he certainly did not rule it out. But this is a very exceptional deep draft, and regardless of where they're picking, even later into the first round, they could still get their hands on an excellent prospect. Now, of course, the Penguins also made some other news today, signing defenseman Marcus Pettersson to a long-term contract extension, 5-year deal, just a little bit over $4 million per year. Of course, they acquired him from the Anaheim Ducks a little while back for Daniel Sprong, a young prospect forward who wasn't really working out with them, getting the opportunity. Pettersson was qualified this past summer on a 1-year contract as a restricted free agent with under $900,000, pretty cheap deal. They wanted to sign him longer term at the time. Pretty much had a handshake agreement in place, but they just couldn't get it on the books due to their salary cap situation. But now they've got it lined up, so starting next year, that new contract kicks in. They've been very impressed with Pettersson and like what he brings to their decor. So clearly a $4 million deal kicks in next year. The final 2 years of the 5-year deal, he does have a form of a modified no-trade clause where he can list 8 teams that he cannot be traded to. So that certainly makes their salary cap situation for the Penguins moving forward into next year very interesting, and it could certainly impact their plans ahead of the deadline. Let's take a quick look here from CapFriendly.com what they have committed next year. As you can see here, they have 12 players under contract for the upcoming season, just shy of $63 million. They have several players who need contracts, including both of their goaltenders, and Matt Murray and Tristan Jarry. They've got a couple of blue liners in Juuso Riikola and pending UFA Justin Schultz. Then they've also got forwards Alex Galchenyuk, who's a UFA. Then they've also got some youngsters in Jarrett McCann, Dominic Cahoon, and Dominic Simon. So obviously, some of these guys are going to be guys they're going to want to keep around here in the fold, but depending on what we get for a salary cap increase, and it's not expected to go up substantially, they very well are going to have some tough decisions to make. And as we know, speaking of trade deadline plans, it's well known that Galchenyuk would certainly be a player that Rutherford would like to move. But the fact that he struggled so mightily in the last couple of years is certainly not going to bode well for having him move along. It's not going to be easy to do. They might have to add a sweetener in there to have another team take that contract on. I mean, for example, one team that's been discussed before is potentially taking on unfavorable contracts would be the Anaheim Ducks, they're not going to be a playoff team this year. They have some space. They get a lot of LTIR usage that they could dip into here. Maybe they would take on the Galchenyuk contract in exchange for getting some other type of sweetener in the deal. It's just a possibility, especially where they've had recent dealings as well. So there's some confidence and familiarity between those two GMs in their past discussion. He was also asked if he felt pressured to add on the blue line, and he said that he didn't really feel that need. The fact that they should be getting Brian Dumoulin returning soon, felt that their blue line was in pretty good shape. He did give some good prompts to guys like Jack Johnson as well as Pettersson and others on that back end playing well, that he didn't feel the need to necessarily add in that regard. It's pretty much a top 6 forwards, but they're looking for ahead of the deadline here. So we'll see what the Penguins do. Let me know which top 6 forward who's been mentioned in trade rumors that you think would be the best fit for the Penguins, and let me know what your mock trades would be and what would you be willing to give up to add to this Penguins roster. Now I want to jump over here quickly and look at one of their division rivals, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Now the Blue Jackets are a team who's a bit of a surprise this year. They're certainly doing quite well, better than expected by many people, myself included. John Tortorella's got them playing very well. They've been getting extremely good goaltending from Korpisalo and Elvis Merzlikins. Certainly better than many expected, which has them in a playoff conversation. But there's still some rumors. There's been a lot of festering here. It seems to be not going away. I haven't really talked about it here in a while, but Josh Anderson's name has been up in the rumor mill quite a bit. A lot of other NHL GMs and executives seem to think that there is a good possibility that he could be traded ahead of the deadline, especially if the Jackets fall out of contention here, because they're certainly not guaranteed a spot. They're in the running, in the mix there, but if they have a bad stretch, it could cost them that potential spot. And he's also on many trade bait boards around. You look at Sportsnet, TSN, all the major media outlets. They all seem to have a sense that there is a possibility Anderson could be on his way out of Columbus. Now, a little bit of that has to do with the fact that his last contract in 2017 negotiations were really tough, did not go well. There appeared to be, a bit of a divide there amongst the team and the player. Obviously, things could very well have been patched up since then, but there's obviously history there, some contentious negotiations. He's going to be owed a qualifying offer of a minimum $2.1 million. He's 1 year away from being an unrestricted free agent. This time around, though, he does have arbitration rights, so there's no way that the contract negotiations would drag on as long as they did before. But at the same time, they could very well end up on a 1 year deal. If they can't come to terms, have to go to arbitration, he could get a 1 year deal and potentially walk next year as a UFA. And I guess if the team gets the feeling that that could likely be what happens or what plays out here, they could potentially look to move him. But he's certainly a player they would want around in the mix for their playoff run if they're able to get in. Clearly, he's a big, strong, power forward type of guy who can certainly pitch in offensively and play that physical style of the game. He's certainly the type of player you'd want on your team for the playoffs. So some tough decisions in Columbus ahead of the deadline in that regard. Otherwise, I don't see the Jackets doing a whole heck of a lot. They really spent a lot of assets last year going forward to really get one round of playoff hockey under their belts, which was their first ever playoff series win. There's certainly a bit of a difference of opinion out there, I think, between those who think it was worth it versus those who think it wasn't. But at the end of the day, I don't see them spending like they did last year to make a bunch of additions, maybe some minor moves, and potentially Anderson. Like I said, it is possible. I think it's likely that he stays myself, but it seems to be in the rumor mill and it won't go away. So maybe there is more to it. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. Now let's take a look at the New Jersey Devils. Now, of course, we know the Devils are not having a good year. They've already gone through lots of change this year, and it's being reported that a couple of their veterans, captain, defenseman Andy Green, and forward Travis Zajac, have both had meetings with interim GM Tom Fitzgerald about their futures with the club, where they both have a form of a no-trade clause. He's already met with them to kind of discuss their futures and see where things might be at with what their personal needs are, if they're willing to waive or not. Now, of course, they didn't really release a whole lot on Andy Green. All he said was that they had a discussion about his future and left it at that. But obviously, I think it's unlikely he gets tendered a new contract offer by the Devils. He certainly could be an attractive piece for, not too bad of a price, I would think, at the deadline to go help another team with some defensive depth, bring some leadership. He's been around a long time, got lots of experience. In the case of Zajac, he's been vocal on his own as well, even though it was reported by NHL insiders before, and Elliot Friedman mentioned this, that Zajac did not want to waive his no-trade clause, and he prefers to stay in New Jersey. So I guess we'll see what happens. All Green said is that he was not asked to waive, which obviously at this point there's no trade to really consider. They wouldn't be doing that at this point just yet, but obviously they want to get a sense for what they may or may not be willing to do, so when they have those discussions with other teams, they kind of know what to expect here. Now lastly here, I want to take a look at the Ottawa Senators. On a recent Senators game, Bruce Garriock on the intermission during his question period segment discussed many of the guys on the Senators who need new contracts and what their futures might be. And apparently there's some players that are likely to stay and some players that are likely to go. He's indicated here that defenseman Dylan DeMello certainly has lots of interest from around the league, and there's a lot of question marks on whether or not he gets re-signed or whether or not he gets traded before the deadline. He's a pending unrestricted free agent, and there's a lot of questions whether or not he fits with the team longer term. I mean, he's done an okay job this year, but there's certainly lots of younger defensemen in the organization who are going to be needing more ice time, and he could end up potentially blocking him out here. You guys like Eric Brandstrom, you get Christian Rolandon, who's coming back from injury here soon. You got Jacob Bernard Docker playing college hockey, and plus some of the other guys already in the lineup like Shabbat, so clearly there might not be room for everybody, and DeMello could be expendable, and I think a lot of that's just going to depend on what the potential package coming back could be. What they can get for this asset will be decided later on. They looked at players like Vladislav Nemestikov, for example, Tyler Ennis as potential trade chips. Even Ron Hainsey's not a guarantee he would go. Apparently there is some interest amongst the Senators to possibly re-sign him to another one-year deal. Obviously they need to have some veterans around, and instead of DeMello's moved, it could open up a possibility of Hainsey coming back. So it's not a foregone conclusion that he goes. Same with Mark Borieski. Borieski's been with the organization his entire career, is looked upon as a leader in the dressing room, a very popular player, plays hard all the time, and certainly could be re-signed, but it's certainly question marks what his future holds. Now, GM Pierre Dorian's currently on a scouting trip overseas right now. When he comes back here in the next week or so, negotiations are expected to kick off with many of these guys, including center iceman Jean-Gabriel Pageau, who is certainly at the forefront of their guys who need new contracts, and question marks around the future with the franchise. But Garriock's indicated here that he feels the Senators do have a fair bit of interest in returning Pageau to the club. He's a local product, been with the team a long time. They certainly need some veterans around, and he could be one of those guys to help lead a lot of these youngsters here as the rebuild continues. So there's certainly going to be a lot of movement from the Senators at the deadline. There's certainly not the big story like they've been the past couple of years at the deadline on some big names being moved out. But Pageau certainly will generate the most interest. But there's lots of other good depth pieces there that could be had by other teams for small prices. There's a lot of guys with expiring contracts, and they will once again have a very busy NHL trade deadline coming next month. So, of course, as always, want to know your thoughts and opinions on all these teams and their potential moves ahead of the deadline. And let me know your mock trades down in the comments, and we can discuss further. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content, and give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.